I think Archbishop Kikuchi, you can begin.
Okay. The topic of the reflection is Fratelli Tutti, a call to human fraternity. As you know, it is the letter of Holy Father. And Archbishop Tarcisio Isao Kikuchi SVD is from Tokyo, Japan, as you know. He was President of Caritas Asia. And he will now speak for 20 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt your sharing, and I'm very highly honored to be called to conclude the day with my reflection on Fratelli Tutti. I don't have the songs like yesterday's Bishop Alvin's sharing and reflection, but I have a lot of quotation from the Holy Father's writing. Since the beginning of 2020, we have been wandering in darkness. Many people are searching for a way out of this pandemic. This incident of the pandemic will surely be engraved in the history. Pope Francis' encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which was published in the midst of this pandemic, should be understood in the context of the reality of such a world under the pandemic. Reflecting on the reality of the last 2 years or so, I'd like to share my thoughts, although my knowledge is limited and I'm not a trained theologian, but I want to share some reflections on Fratelli Tutti. By the way, it will take some time to reach the Fratelli Tutti. I'm starting from something else. The Pope Francis resumed the general audience on September 2nd, 2020, which had been suspended for some time during the early stage of the pandemic, and brought a small congregation into the courtyard of the palace. And he said, I quote, "The current pandemic has highlighted our interdependence. We are all connected to each other for better or for worse. Therefore, to emerge from this crisis better than before, we have to do so together, not alone. We must do it together, all of us, in solidarity." The Holy Father continued saying that diversity and solidarity united in harmony, this is the way. Solidarity is one of the key concepts of the Holy Father since 2013 when he became the Pope, and the idea has been repeated wherever the Holy Father has been too. Explaining the concept of the solidarity, the Holy Father wrote in Evangelii Gaudium as follows, I quote, "The word solidarity is a little worn and at times poorly understood, but it refers to something more than a few sporadic acts of generosity. It presumes the creation of a new mindset which thinks in terms of community and the priority of the life of all over the appropriation of goods by a few." Looking ahead to the post-pandemic world order, and also in order to set the right path for the Church in the future, Pope Francis repeatedly insists that solidarity must be the central value. Despite the Holy Father's repeatedly expression of his hopes for the post-pandemic, the reality of our world is following completely the opposite path. The Holy Father expressed his indignation during the Urbi et Orbi message on Easter 2021, I quote, "The pandemic is still spreading while the social and economic crisis remains severe, especially for the poor. Nonetheless, and this is scandalous, armed conflicts have not ended and the military arsenals are being strengthened. That is today's scandal." As the entire world has been in a difficult situation, we, the Church, also have been facing difficulties for the past 2 or 3 years. As for the Church, in order to take measures against infection and to take responsible actions to protect each other's lives, we are facing a period of challenges such as complete close down of the church activities and temporary cancellation of public masses. I think the main reason why we see this situation as challenging is because of lack of joy. Of course, for each Catholic, it means that they have been spiritually depleted, such as not being able to attend Sunday masses and the planned events of all kinds being canceled and deprived them of the enjoyment of being with various people. But the most importantly, we have been deprived of joy because we are not able to come together as a community. We are isolated physically. Pope Francis begins the Evangelii Gaudium with this sentence: "The joy of the gospel fills the hearts and lives of all who encounter Jesus." The Holy Father, who puts emphasis on the importance of going out and deepening our fellowship in sharing the joy of living the gospel rather than living in our own comfort zone, forgetting to care for others, points out the following. Finally, an evangelizing community is filled with joy. It knows how to rejoice always. It celebrates every small victory, every step forward in the work of evangelization. This is Evangelii Gaudium 24. Then he puts emphasis on the importance of being in a community. I quote, "Here now, especially where we are, a little flock, the Lord's disciples are called to live as a community which is the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We are called to bear witness to a constantly new way of living together in fidelity to the gospel. Let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of community." Evangelii Gaudium 92. Unfortunately, the path that the Church has chosen to take in order to combat the pandemic has limited our opportunities to actually gather together, to pray, study, and work. We are learning a hard lesson right now, which reminds us that by limiting activities of faith communities, we also limit the joy of our faith. In November 2019, Pope Francis visited Japan. The theme throughout the visit of Japan was "Protect All Life." Each of us has been given a life with dignity in the image of God and is guided along with all others toward our eternal home. The world has been formed by God as a dwelling place for man. Therefore, in order to protect all life, the dignity of each and every human being, as well as the environment of the earth, our common home, must be cared for, and we must address the various issues of life through an integral viewpoint. Pope Francis left rich treasure of words in his brief visit to Japan. The Holy Father spoke about the value of life from various perspectives in Tokyo. During the homily in Tokyo, the Holy Father said as follows, I quote, "Here in Japan, in the society with a highly developed economy, the young people I met this morning spoke to me about the many people who are socially isolated. They remain on the margins, unable to grasp the meaning of life and their own existence. Increasingly, the home, school, and community, which are meant to be places where we support and help one another, are being eroded by excessive competition in the pursuit of profit and efficiency. Isolation and loneliness, which is the opposite of diversity and solidarity, is a threat to life in modern society. The present pandemic is adding more negative energy to this trend. In response to such a reality, the Holy Father repeatedly points out the importance of helping each other in solidarity and of paying attention to the cry of others. From day one of his pontificate, Pope Francis has been pointing out how the indifference of people of this modern society is affecting so many lives of vulnerable people. On 8 July 2013, when he visited the Italian Mediterranean island of Lampedusa and celebrated Mass with the refugees coming from Africa, the Holy Father said in his homily that, the culture of comfort, which makes us think only of ourselves, makes us insensitive to the cries of other people, makes us live in soap bubbles, which, however lovely, are insubstantial. They offer a fleeting and empty illusion which results in indifference to others. Indeed, it even leads to the globalization of indifference. In this globalized world, we have fallen into globalized indifference. It is the top priority of Pope Francis to make a society in which no one is excluded and forgotten. During the meeting with the victims of the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in Tokyo in November 2019, the Holy Father said, I quote, "No one rebuilds by himself or herself. Nobody can start over alone. We have to find a friendly and fraternal hand capable of helping to raise not just the city, but also our horizon and our hope." Hope is born only when we take an interest in the people who face crisis, when we strive to be with them and walk together. It is essential to have food, clothing, and shelter to survive. But in addition to that, it is essential to have the hope to live. Hope cannot be given from the outside. It can only be created through mutual fellowship or communion. Hope deprives its strength from the mutual support of solidarity and arises from the depth of the hearts of those who need it. There is more than just vague anxiety about the life-threatening crisis caused by this pandemic. The concrete problem is the reality of people who have lost their jobs and relationships, of those who are victims of discrimination and exclusion, and of those who are deeply isolated and suffer without any help. There are so many people whose lives have been threatened in many ways and whose hope to live has faded. In addition, there is even confrontation due to violence in this world, which is the exact opposite of solidarity. So where is the hope? Now, finally, I'm reaching to Fratelli Tutti. In Fratelli Tutti, the Holy Father clarifies what direction we should take while facing all these cruel realities of the modern world. In Fratelli Tutti, the Holy Father writes that through a worldwide tragedy like the COVID-19 pandemic momentarily revived the sense that we are a global community, all in the same boat, where one person's problems are the problems of all. Once more, we realized that no one is saved alone. We can only be saved together. 32. But this sense of fraternity is short-lived in a world seduced by selfishness. The desire to exclude different people and ensure one's own safety is becoming apparent as a national ego even in the midst of this pandemic. The Holy Father has already repeatedly called on us not to allow the disparity between the rich and the poor to become the disparity of value of human lives. The Holy Father also pointed out that the taste of fraternity has been lost in modern society dominated by virtual reality. I just quote, "Today we can recognize that we fed ourselves on dreams of splendor and grandeur and ended up consuming distraction, insularity, and solitude. We gorged ourselves on networking and lost the taste of fraternity. We looked for quick and safe results, only to find ourselves overwhelmed by impatience and anxiety. Prisoners of virtual reality, we lost the taste and flavor of the truly real. 33. Then the Holy Father continues to point out that we are now facing the challenge to rethink our styles of life, our relationships, the organization of our societies, and above all, the meaning of our own existence. And that is also the challenge we are facing in our reality in Asia. For the past 10 years, after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, the Catholic Church in Japan has been trying to create hope for life in the disaster-hit area. I think it was a historical challenge for the history of the Church in Japan. We could manage to organize the relief activities beyond the limit of each individual religious communities. We have concretely demonstrated the importance of working together with the people in the disaster-hit area through our continuous presence in the number of volunteer centers. Also, flexible personnel assignments beyond the constraints of contract with the local diocese made us able to close the local church and people. There are many decisions made by the church in Japan that broke tradition and common practice. Within these past 10 years, the church in Japan has had the opportunity to change ourselves to create hope for life. It is important to initiate building projects, distribution of goods, and other programs related to food, clothing, and shelter. But it is also important to create good and deep relationships with the local people by walking the path of life together and by living and working together. I believe through all these activities in the disaster-hit area, we have been sowing seeds to create hope for living. My time is almost coming to up, and it's coming to the 6 p.m. So let me conclude. Let me conclude this quotation from the Fratelli Tutti. Human beings are so made that they cannot live, develop, and find fulfillment except in the sincere gift of self to others. Nor can they fully know themselves apart from an encounter with other persons. 87. Then he continues, life exists where there is bonding, communion, fraternity, and life is stronger than death when it is built on true relationships and bonds of fidelity. On the contrary, there is no life when we claim to be self-sufficient and live as islands. In these attitudes, death prevails. So in Genesis chapter 2, the Lord God said, "It is not good for a man to be alone. I will make helper for him." And he created two. In other words, since people cannot live alone, they are destined to live by helping each other. People are called to live a life with dignity in the fellowship, supporting and helping each other. So we have the potential to be beacons of hope in solidarity in the realities of Asia. So the question for us right now is, how can we be the beacon of hope in this reality of Asia? Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop Tarcisio Isao Kikuchi. You helped us to reflect once again over the encyclical letter of the Holy Father, Fratelli Tutti. Thank you. And our Cardinal Oswald Gracious has a memento for you.